Hello and welcome to the League of Conservation Voters Climate Action Google Hangout. I'm Tiernan Sittenfeld, the Senior Vice President for Government Affairs with LCV. I'm delighted to be joined by environmental champion Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is with us from his DC Senate office, but of course comes from the great state of Rhode Island, and also to be joined by LCV President Gene Karpinski. We're looking forward to a great conversation today about the impacts of climate change and what we can do to really reduce carbon pollution and address the climate crisis. We very much want to make this interactive and to hear from all of you. So if you'd like to ask a question, what you should do is submit it in the comment section on the Google Events page or on Twitter with the hashtag #TimeToWakeUp and hashtag 100days. We'll do our best to get all of your questions answered today. And now I'd like to turn it over to Gene.
Thanks, Tiernan. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Gene Karpinski. I'm the president of the League of Conservation Voters. And as you know, fighting the climate crisis is a major challenge for us, and there's not a day that goes by we don't hear more about that problem. And one of our most important jobs is to find more people who are climate champions, who wake up every day to say, what can I do to help solve the climate crisis? And with us today is Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, who is the single biggest climate champion in the United States Senate. He's such a champion that for the last 3 years, he's been taken to the Senate floor every week to make a speech highlighting the climate crisis and what we can do about it. And just this week, we were all pleased to watch. If you haven't had a chance to see it, go make sure you watch it, read it, and watch it. He gave his 100th speech talking about the climate crisis, what folks can do, and he actually asked people around the country to say, share your ideas about what we can do to be engaged. So he's been a great champion. We need more like him. Let's give him a round of applause. And Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you for joining us today from the great state of Rhode Island.
Thank you, Gene. It is wonderful to be with you and with Tiernan, and I so appreciate what the League of Conservation does to get people motivated on this issue and to make sure that it's right in the face of people who are running for office. And a particular thank you for taking out an advertisement in a home state paper to congratulate me on number 100. That was a really nice touch. I appreciate that.
Our pleasure.
Great. Well, let's get right to some questions. So as a reminder, you're watching the League of Conservation Voters Climate Action Google Hangout with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse from Rhode Island and LCV President Gene Karpinski. If you'd like to ask a question, you can submit it in the comment section of the Google event page or on Twitter with the hashtag #TimeToWakeUp and hashtag 100days. And now I'm going to go to the first question, which is about the economy and jobs, which is from Sid on Google. So this is the question. Can you comment on the economic growth and increase in jobs that comes with being more energy efficient?
Take it, Senator.
Absolutely. One of the things about the opposition on this subject is that they tend to traffic in really big lies. And one of the really big lies is that, climate change might be serious, but the price of dealing with it, oh my gosh, the jobs that we'll lose, the economic hit that we'll take, that's the way they like to frame the argument. In fact, that frame is backwards. We will do much better as an economy if we own the renewable energy future that the world is heading towards. We'll certainly avoid a lot of pain and expense associated with the consequences of uncontrolled climate change. But even just in the energy sector alone, I think we will do far better in our country if we are manufacturing solar, wind, investing in efficiency, and doing the things that we can do here at home to grow a green economy. It's just a better business proposition than continuing to burn fossil fuels. And the solar industry has already eclipsed coal mining in terms of employment. And it's only growing.
You know, Senator, that's great. As I travel around the country, I mean, the concept of those clean energy jobs is becoming more and more real to more and more people. I was just meeting yesterday with our folks from Michigan, and the auto industry has been transformative and created those new cars of the future. I'll be out in Colorado next week, and people understand the wind turbines and the great jobs that have been created in Colorado there. I was out in California last week, and the solar energy industry is booming, as you said. And all around the country, people are retrofitting buildings and new buildings done a certain way. So those are the jobs of the future, and they're good on the
even in Republican states. Even in Republican states, you see it. Texas has a huge solar industry, and Iowa is over 30% wind.
That's right. I think I saw I think I saw a fact that said over 80% of the wind power in this country is in congressional districts of Republican members. So some of them are starting to realize that, and that's important because we need to have bipartisan solutions to solve this really complicated problem. Tiernan, what you got?
Good discussion, both of you. We're going to get to our next question, which is from Tim on Google+, who would like to know your thoughts on why so many people do not believe scientists on climate change. Senator Whitehouse, I know this is something that you've said a lot about, so we'd love to hear your thoughts.
Well, you go all the way back to the tobacco fight, and the tobacco industry created a kind of false parallel science to go alongside the real science and try to compete with it. They had the advantage that they didn't have to win the fight. All they had to do was create enough doubt that people kept smoking. And so they created the Tobacco Institute, supposed to sound so academic. Well, the polluters have gotten a lot more sophisticated since then, but this vast denial apparatus that propagates the false doubt, that props up the phony science, that gets these yahoos who can't survive peer-reviewed scrutiny onto Fox News, onto the cable shows, saying that they're scientists, they create an artificial conflict about this, and that's why I think there's doubt. A lot of people haven't seen through the scam that's being perpetrated. So that's one of the reasons I hope that we get another lawsuit out of the Department of Justice, like the one that they brought against the tobacco industry, that showed that that whole fraudulent scam was a racketeering enterprise and held them accountable for it.
You know, and we appreciate all your efforts to call out these deniers. It's pretty amazing that the person who chairs the Senate Environment Committee wrote a book recently that said climate change is a hoax. So we need to call out the industry folks who are creating these lies, and also the elected members of Congress who are being the puppets and saying those same kinds of things. So thanks for all your efforts there.
And of course, as people know, Senator Inhofe also a couple of months ago literally took to the Senate floor with a snowball, and Senator Whitehouse was there to call him out on that as well. So that was excellent. Our next question is about oil subsidies. It's from Warren on Twitter, who'd like to know when we're going to stop subsidizing big oil.
So that's a really key battle. And just in terms of subsidizing big oil, we, I think, calculate it at around $80 billion as a big oil subsidy. I think that may be over a 10-year budget horizon. And so we often think of it in those terms, the direct specific benefits. But this study that just was in the news today from the International Monetary Fund that said that the annual subsidy to the coal, oil, and gas industries is about $5 trillion, and it's $700 billion every single year just in America alone from not having them pay the cost of the harm that their product causes. Again, we think in the Senate in 10-year increments when we're thinking about budget numbers, because that's, you know, we're always building out to that 10-year budget horizon, which means that it's $7 trillion. $7 trillion. No wonder they fight so hard when they have a sweet subsidy like that supporting the damage that they cause to the rest of us.
Now, there have been some votes in the Congress to try to cut those subsidies that you talked about. Unfortunately, and there have been some great leaders on it. Senator Ed Markey, just north of you from the great state of Massachusetts, has been one of them. We haven't won those votes, but it's a very powerful case. The public is totally on our side. You just need to keep fighting that fight because it makes no sense to subsidize the dirty polluting industries as we do today.
Definitely not. I'd like to remind you all that you're watching a League of Conservation Voters Climate Action Google Hangout with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, a true environmental champion, and LCV President Gene Karpinski, also a true environmental champion. And if you'd like to be in the conversation and ask a question, you can do so on Twitter with the hashtag #TimeToWakeUp or hashtag 100days. You can also go to the comment section on the Google event page. And now I'd like to go to our next question, which is about a carbon fee, a topic that I know that Senator Whitehouse has thought about. This is a question from Todd on Twitter, who wants to know, what's the best way to guide a member of Congress to realize a carbon fee with dividends is an option?
That's a great question. I think a lot of us on the Democrat side recognize it as an option. The Republicans have a few steps they have to get through before they get to that. Step one is they have to realize that climate change is real and not a hoax. And I think we blew them out of that position in the round of votes on the Keystone Pipeline. Now the worst of them are in the position that, well, you know, climate change is real, but the climate always changes and we're not doing anything about it. So we've got to correct that because it's very obviously man-made carbon pollution that is causing this. And then we've got to get them to concede that it's serious. And I think the American people see that it's serious and that they'll have to follow. When they concede that it's real, man-made, and serious, then they have to do something about it. And the thing that every Republican conservative think tank has come up with as the best solution is a price on carbon, a carbon fee. And even when you get to Republicans who aren't economists, but are away from the bullying effect of the fossil fuel industry and as amplified by Citizens United, they're also talking about carbon fees. Former directors of the EPA, former Treasury secretaries, former members of Congress, and so forth. So I think the natural pressure of getting to the right place on this, which we have to amplify politically, will take them to a carbon fee. But it's going to take some pressure. And nobody's better at that pressure than LCV, so thank you.
And your leadership on this particular piece of the solution is critical. As you said, there's been bipartisan former members of Congress who support this. George Shultz being one of the most prominent ones from the Bush administration. But it needs a lot of work to get more people convinced. In fact, so folks who are listening and watching today, one of the most important things is make sure that your members of Congress hear about your interest in this. You know, in fact, next month. Senator White, as you know, this group called the Citizens Climate Lobby, who will be bringing to D.C. over 500 people to actually go to Capitol Hill, knock on doors, and ask their members to support a version of a carbon fee. So your voices are a critical part of this equation to make sure they hear from back home.
And I want to correct, one of the hashtags that we're using is 100 reasons. So it's hashtag 100 reasons and, of course, hashtag time to wake up. And we, of course, have a lot going on with the Clean Power Plan we expect to be finalized later this summer. That's a huge, huge deal, the single biggest thing that the EPA can do to cut carbon pollution. We'd love to hear both of your thoughts, a little bit more detail about that.
Well, we're very excited about it here in Congress, and we are absolutely committed to defending it. We know that the Republicans will attack it. We think their attack on it is actually a great opportunity for us to, again, point out the disconnect between where the fossil fuel funded Republican Party is and where young Republicans are, where independent voters are, where America is on this. So we look forward to this battle as a great, great opportunity. It is important that we win it. It is important that if they're able to succeed at knocking down the rule with a Congressional Review Act proceeding, that the president will veto it. He's promised that he will. I think that this whole conflict plays very well into our hands. And interestingly, some of my Republican colleagues have said, you know, we need to attack this rule. We know we'll lose. We need to get it out of our system. And once we've got it out of our system, some of us are willing to listen to a little bit more reason.
No, and in fact, the president gave a great speech almost 2 years ago outlining a climate action plan. And the centerpiece, the single biggest piece of that was the Clean Power Plan, which, and this summer, the head of the EPA, Gina McCarthy, will finalize that plan. It will be the single biggest step this country has ever taken to cut carbon pollution. That plan goes back to every state in the country to design their very specific plan to cut carbon pollution from those power plants. So each you in every state, you'll want to weigh in with your governors and your state legislators and your PUC commissioners who will help design the plan state by state. There'll be a national standard to cut pollution. Each state will have a goal, and then the hard work is going to be done state by state on the ground. And that particular proposal, because it's so powerful, is one of the main reasons the president was able to get China for the first time ever to come to the table and said they're going to cut their emissions too, leading up to the big conference in Paris in December. But the Clean Power Plan is the single biggest step our country has taken. So it's not just rhetoric, it's a reality to really make the progress we need to make.
Thanks, Gina, and thanks, Senator Whitehouse. As a reminder, you're watching a Google Hangout about climate change with the League of Conservation Voters, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse and LCV President Jean Karpinski. And to ask a question on Twitter, you can go to 100 Reasons and also to hashtag Time to Wake Up. And our next question relates back to what you were saying a couple of minutes ago, Senator Whitehouse. It's from Elaine on Google+. who would like to know your opinion of the relationship between the EPA and Congress and how you would make it better.
Well, the first thing to know is that EPA is way more popular with the American people than Congress is. So when members of Congress attack the EPA, they're not attacking EPA from a great position of public approval. And often they tend to make themselves look pretty foolish, because most Americans are actually surprised that we don't regulate carbon emissions from power plants already. So the fact that Republicans are objecting to President Obama's first ever regulation of carbon emissions doesn't stand them in very good stead. So I think the important thing for EPA is not to worry about getting along better with controlled Congress, but to worry about making sure that it's getting its facts right, that it's working hard with local communities to make sure it's going, underneath the political radar of Washington, D.C., and to make sure that they're fighting for the long-term values that we all need to defend in order to solve these various environmental problems. If they're true to their faith that way and are paying attention to people at the local level, they'll be just fine.
No, that's exactly right. And this is, again, those who are against the Clean Power Plan are clearly out of step with the urgent moment that we're in, but more importantly, out of step with the public. And there's been a lot of research, state by state, across the country. The public overwhelmingly supports cutting carbon pollution. They want EPA to do the job. They don't trust Congress. They know EPA was set up to protect our health, protect our air, protect our water. That's what they're all about, and they're saying, let's get on with it. In fact, many of them think we should be already doing this. And so it's a big step forward. It's strong public support. But again, folks who are watching, make sure you all weigh in with your elected officials and with your senators and your representatives and your governors to make sure this plan becomes a reality.
Absolutely. Now it looks like we have a question about supporting clean energy from Deanna, who asks, in Rhode Island, how many of our politicians are working toward clean energy? If my reps are already supporting it, what else can I do?
I'm very lucky to represent Rhode Island because we are a state that is very, very strongly invested in clean energy. The legislature has set up an entire commission to deal with the emerging threats from climate change that the state faces. We're a part of the RGGI Cap and Trade New England Coalition. The results of that for us have been highly positive. We've gotten back in reduced use and efficiency investments far more than we've paid in the RGGI fees, so it's been a real win. We are building America's first ever offshore wind farm in Rhode Island Sound, just off of our waters, and the whole state really pulled together to make that happen. So I think it's really strong in Rhode Island. There isn't a whole lot that I could ask to improve, and it's at the state legislature level, it's at the different city councils level, it's at the level of the Governor Raimondo and her administration. Before that, Governor Link Chafee could not have been stronger on these issues. And of course, the congressional delegation is unanimous in a strong environmental. I guess I'd say we all have good LCV ratings, Gene.
Yes, indeed, at the top. But again, if you folks in Rhode Island, make sure you acknowledge and give shout-outs to Senator Whitehouse and your other elected officials there. When champs stand up, they need to hear that they're being rewarded for that. Plus, there are plenty of others. I'm sure you all have relations with folks in other states, and they also need to hear about why Rhode Island is one of those shining lights and why aren't other states doing that well.
And LCV does both put out a national environmental scorecard each year, which is available on our website at lcv.org/scorecard. So you can see the excellent votes taken by the Rhode Island delegation. We also put up votes as they happen in real time and give you an opportunity to communicate either your pleasure and your pride, for example, with Senator Whitehouse, or in some cases for those of you who are not as fortunate to be represented by such a champion, you can also convey your dismay when your representatives or your senators take bad votes on the environment. So we encourage you to definitely do that. And just as a reminder, I know we have a few minutes left. If people would like to participate in the conversation or ask a question, you can do that on Twitter at #TimeToWakeUp or #100Reasons. And now we'll go to our next question, which is about international climate negotiations. This is from Todd on Twitter, who would like to know, how can citizens best encourage elected officials to support the president's commitment in Paris at COP21?
I think that the best thing that people can do is to make their support for a strong agreement in Paris public. So write letters to your newspaper to get published on the editorial page. Get onto social media and show your support. Communicate with elected officials and let them know that you think this is really important. And I think to the extent that you're a part of a business or an organization that deals with businesses, the vast majority of businesses in the United States are doing good things on climate, want there to be a good climate regulation, and unfortunately the Republicans overlook that huge segment of the business community in order to focus on the narrow fossil fuel crowd that has so much control over them right now. So anything that we can do to express the views of small business and big business alike that this is a good idea really helps amplify the public voice in an important way.
That's right. I think, most people aren't paying as much attention as you all who are cued into this conversation today. And elevating your voices, both to your elected officials, as we've talked about, but also publicly, as Senator Whitehouse said. There's regularly some kind of story about climate change. It might be the fact that the first 3 months this year are the hottest 3 months ever. We're going to hear from the Pope very soon on this issue. When those stories appear, use those occasions, get your own voices into the newspapers and say, and there can be a major step forward coming up in Paris this December, and all countries need to unite and be part of that agreement. So using those other news stories as occasions to get your voices to your elected officials and in the press, critically important.
Great, and now it looks like we have another question about climate change deniers. This is from Jordan on Twitter, who asks, what do you say to people who claim that nature, not mankind, is the main contributor to climate change?
It depends on how they're approaching me, but if I think that they're sincere, I'll point out that we have known since Abraham Lincoln was riding around Washington, D.C. in his top hat as President of the United States, that carbon dioxide warms the planet as its concentration goes up in the atmosphere. So that's not new news. We know we've put gigatons of carbon dioxide up in the atmosphere, so we know that has to be having an effect. And because I'm from the ocean state, I very often take the conversation to the seashore, where it's really hard to deny. The heat is going into the ocean, and it takes a thermometer to measure that Narragansett Bay is 3 to 4 degrees mean winter water temperature up in the last 30 or 40 years. You go to the Naval Station Newport, and the tide gauge shows about 10 inches of tide increase in the last half century. And the simple tests that kids do with the 3rd grade fish tank are enough to measure pH and measure that the ocean is acidifying. And when you add the carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, you can replicate that experiment very simply in a high school science lab. So it's really largely undeniable. If they'll still listen, I'll go on a little bit to talk about the denial apparatus and what a phony sham operation that is and how they shouldn't be fooled by it.
And a couple other places, look, so if folks, it was in some of the newspapers today, yesterday, President Obama gave a very strong, powerful speech to the Coast Guard Academy talking about the national security impacts on climate change. And again, throughout that speech, he referenced a lot of the facts that are out there from the scientists, from the International Commission. So there are a lot of places to go, including our Defense Department, which understands that climate change is one of the gravest threats we face internationally to our security. So there are a lot of sources from all kinds of places, whether it's a scientist, the Defense Department, military experts, to really help buttress the case. It's become clearer and clearer, sadly, over the last decade in particular, but the facts are very clear on this one.
Thanks to you both. There's been a lot of great questions and good discussion, and we're coming to the end of our chat. So I'd like to give first Senator Whitehouse and then Jean a chance to just offer some brief closing remarks.
Great. Well, just thank you to everybody who tuned in to the Google chat. It's really important that we all pull together. I think that between now and November of 2016, when the Republican Party has to face a general election, presidential electorate we're in a position to get some really, really big moves going our way. Gene mentioned the Pope's encyclical and his speech to Congress. We have the rule on clean power plants. We've got Paris coming up. This is really the time to redouble our efforts, and nobody supports us better and is a better voice in all of this than the League of Conservation Voters. So particularly to Gene and to Tiernan and all the LCV members who are such important allies in all of this, thank you. You guys are outstanding.
So let me conclude by saying thank you. First of all, we need more champs. There's not a better champ than Senator Whitehouse, so shout out to him for being such a great champ. We need more like him, so encourage your elected officials to be champions, and most importantly, make sure your voices are heard. We can win this fight. The facts are on our side. The crisis is real. It's all about the political will, and that's why we need your help. So thanks for joining us, and let's help keep spreading the word.
And thanks to you both so much for your inspiring words and for your leadership, and thanks to everyone else for joining us in our Google chat today. For more information about LCV and ways that you can take action to protect the environment and fight climate change, you can go to our website at lcv.org/act. To stay up to date on breaking congressional and environmental issues, you can follow us on Twitter at LCVoters. You can also follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/LCVoters. And now we're going to close by just showing a short clip of Senator Whitehouse's fabulous leadership when it comes to fighting climate change. Thank you so much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
I take time every week to speak a little bit about climate change.
This is yours.
The reason that I wanted to start giving these weekly speeches was because the opponents of action on climate change love the dark, spotlighting the issue, put that darkness away from them, and they have to respond. I want to take a few moments this afternoon to do something that has become a bit of a ritual with me, persistence, and just keeping the issue in front of them every week. I am here today for now the 50th time. Why do I do this? Being from Rhode Island makes a big impact on my views on climate change because we are the ocean state. For my ocean state, carbon pollution presents a triple whammy from the sea. Higher seas, warming seas, and more acidic seas. When you go to the ocean, that's where the consequences of carbon pollution become completely undeniable. But I think for a great many of my colleagues, I think for virtually everybody on the other side of the aisle, they just assume, wash their hands of it, forget about it, pretend it's not happening, and continue to sleepwalk towards disaster. Up against the propaganda and political fight of the fossil fuel span to complete towards facts and really towards science. And putting that into play was an important speech. I give these speeches because climate change is real. Because the campaign of denial is as poisonous to our democracy as carbon pollution is to our atmosphere and oceans. But we have to pay attention, Mr. President. We have to wake up.